if you're really trying to work on your soloing and you're practicing all the right stuff, putting in the time, but when it comes time to actually step up on a gig and take a solo and nothing comes together the way you imagined, or you just freeze, then this lesson's for you. I'm going to break down the 5 reasons that most bassists struggle when it comes time to take a bass solo, and I'm going to show you how to fix them. My name's Lorin Cohen. I'm a professional bassist here in New York City, and I've spent my career playing with some of the best jazz musicians in the world and coaching hundreds of bassists on how to break through their soloing struggles with my Bass Improv Mastery coaching program. I've seen what works and what doesn't, and I'm going to show you a few of those things today. And stick around, because the biggest reason you struggle, the one that keeps most bassists in that solo freeze zone, I'm saving that for last. So the first reason you're struggling is you're just trying to use too much stuff when you solo. Most bassists think that soloing will get better the more materials, the more harmonic or melodic materials they have at their disposal, and that's dead wrong. The reality is you can start playing killer solos right now with the materials that you have without gaining any new scales, arpeggios, all that sort of stuff. And if you're struggling with soloing, it's a good chance you're giving yourself too many options, that you're not limiting your materials, and that just makes it impossible to focus, to really develop and to play with confidence. Let's face it, improvising is an endless ocean, and if we don't give ourselves some boundaries, we're just going to flow it out into open water. So if this is something you struggle with, we're just going to break it down. We're just going to take one chord, okay? It's going to take one chord, just say D minor 7th here, and we're not going to think about scales. We're not even going to think about arpeggios. We're just going to take a triad, just a D minor triad. Doesn't get any simpler than that, okay? And we're just going to sort of work that. We're going to constrain ourselves, limit ourselves to just that one thing, and just play around with it and see how far we can get with that. Remember, I can play inversions, right? From the 3rd there, from the 5th. So many different ways that you can break up a triad and just explore all the ways that you can improvise, just limiting yourself to that one material, just to that one thing. And that's going to give you that freedom, okay? Because if we start thinking about all the possibilities, all the stuff that we can use on this chord, even if this was, especially if this was now part of a progression, right? Forget it. Like that analogy I used earlier, like floating out into open water, getting totally lost, all right? Without setting some boundaries, that's what's going to happen. So if you find yourself getting overwhelmed, take some time just practicing, just restricting yourself to the simplest thing you can use on a chord or on a progression, and just work that a little bit. Explore different ways to just take that simple piece of material as far as you can go. Number 2, you're not focused enough on organizing your ideas with some simple phrasing. The great soloists are great storytellers, and in music that comes down to being great phrasers. They know how to organize their ideas very, very clearly so that the story they're trying to communicate comes out very clearly. And there's so many different ways that we can phrase things, but the easiest phrasing framework that we can start to grasp is just call and response, or as I like to call it, question answer phrasing. And again, we can practice this in the same way that we practiced just limiting materials before. So we take that same D minor 7th chord, right? And we just, again, limit to just a triad, okay? Essentially, we're just going to have a little conversation with ourselves. We're going to ask a question and then answer it. And it can be nice to just jump up the neck and answer it higher on the neck. All right? I mean, that's extremely simple. It's almost stupidly simple, but that was good phrasing. Question, and then my answer. All right? And again, there's millions of ways to do this. That was my question, and now my answer. That was my answer. I played A, C. Okay, so I played the minor 7th there, violated my rule. I didn't restrict myself and stick to just the D triad. Okay, but when you divide it up in terms of octaves and sort of ask your question, in a lower octave, and then answer that question in a higher octave, that can be really helpful too. Okay. thing, all right, just up an octave, and it still functions as question-answer phrasing. This is the sort of thing that you can start bringing into your solos. And sometimes I talk about, to people that I'm working with in my program, think about starting with just riff-based materials with this, right? Just, you could take that triad and almost bluesify it a little bit. Right? Just a little sort of blues riff. Answer. I'm extending a little bit beyond my triad now, okay? I'm moving into some more like simple pentatonic things, but you can do this too, right? It's still limiting, just limiting to this sort of minor zone. Question, answer. Right? All this sort of call and response, question, answer sort of phrasing to give my improvising some logic, to give it some clarity, and to start to tell a story with it. Nothing better than question, answer, call and response. Moving on to number 3, and this may apply to some of you, may not apply to others, but I see it all the time. You're getting lost during your solo. Something that I hear a lot of players talk about, from advanced beginners all the way up through advanced players. A lot of advanced professional players sometimes don't want to admit it, but it's not uncommon that even professional cats will say, man, I just get lost sometimes during the solo. And if you don't know where you are in the form, it's over from an improvisation standpoint, both in terms of your grooving, right, and in your soloing as well. One of the reasons that this tends to happen is because as bassists, when we step out the solo, most of the time we don't have somebody comping for us, right? We can't really lean on the pianist or the guitarist. A lot of times the pianist may just drop out. I'm not a fan of that, but that's what a lot of pianists will just do. And we certainly don't have a bass player playing for us, right? So we need to be super strong and super confident with the form. Now, there are a variety of ways of doing this, and in this video here, I talk about a whole routine that you can go through to memorize tunes. But basically, there's a couple things that I would say would be most helpful for you if you find that you're getting lost in your soloing, or if you're getting lost in your grooving and your comping, for that matter. First thing we're going to do is we're going to get a legal pad, all right? Yellow legal pad like this. And we're literally going to write out the changes and the form of the tune, like I have right here. I'm not sure if you can see this, but I just took "So What," all right, because it's only got two chords, but it's still an AABA form. And actually, I've seen a lot of people get lost in this form because it's just so much of the same material, right? So as you can see here, I just sort of wrote out the form. Wrote out the changes with the 32 bar form, and making the sections really, really clear. The AABA sections of the 32 bar form really clear. Now, I'm not just going to do this once, right? I'm going to go to the next page. I'm going to do it again. It's like, remember when you would study for a test when you were back in school, right? And sometimes, just to memorize stuff, you just write it out. There's really is a connection between writing and sort of inscribing it into your brain. Okay, so I'd say, go through, write it out 10 times. Okay. And being very conscious of what you're doing. So almost taking like a mental picture of what you're writing out here. Specifically with bass players, it tends to be like, where's the top of the form? I mean, we have to be able to demarcate where the top of the form is for everybody, including for us when we're improvising. Okay, so being very clear of, all right, I'm coming to the end of the last A section, and now this is the top. We're back to the top A section, right? Going into the bridge. So sort of getting that mental picture of what you're writing in front of you. Seeing if you can start to see this like in your brain. And then as you're going about your day, as you go out for a walk, if you go to the gym, see if you can literally be like, calling up this image that you wrote out, that you inscribed. If you can be calling this up, and if not, just be drilling this in your head, all right? If you can't call up that mental picture after writing it 10, 15 times, see if you can just drill it in your head. And that leads to the second way, which is literally singing through the form, but singing through the form and being intentional about marking the different sections. So literally singing like the A section when we get to the A section, when we get to the B section. So going to kind of make an idiot of myself here, but on a tune like So What, I may practice this like 1, 2, ba-dum, 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 ba, A, 3, 4, ba-dum, 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 da, da, ba-dum, 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 da, 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 ba-dum. Second A now. Ba-dum, 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 still second A. Going to the bridge. B, B, E. This is the B section. This is the B section. Coming to the end of the B section. Last A. Last A. Right? Last A. Last A. Going to the top. Top. Right? Okay, so made kind of an idiot of myself there, right? But the idea is I'm singing through the form, I'm grabbing little pieces of the melody, but the main thing is I'm being real conscious of marking out where our different sections are, all right? The more you do these two things, the more you're going to become more familiar with the form. And the next step now obviously would be soloing through this. If you can do this without a backing track, so that you really get this sense of, it's inside of you now. You're not relying on a crutch. I think now when you actually start to improvise by writing it out and by singing it like that, it's going to help you a lot more to not get lost. Also, when it comes to getting lost, there's just an element of focus that needs to be there. Sometimes on the gig or in a live situation, we lose focus. We may be, sort of scanning the crowd for a second, or seeing if our girlfriend or our wife is in the crowd, or, seeing who showed up, or, is the drummer vibing me, right? As opposed to just completely staying totally focused on what we got to do, whether that's grooving or soloing and keeping that form. So focus is really important here as well. Moving on to number 4, one of the reasons that you're struggling with your soloing is that you're throwing away too many great ideas. You're not listening to yourself and working in developing the ideas that you're playing. Essentially, you're not engaging in the act of spontaneous composition, which is what improvisation is, right? Improvisation is just composition sped up tremendously fast, right? And so in order to do that, in order to compose spontaneously, we really need to listen to ourselves super, super intently and develop the ideas that we play, and don't throw stuff away. I think the greatest example of this in jazz is Miles Davis's solo on So What, right? First solo I ever transcribed back when I was 14, and this is first solo that a lot of people transcribe. And if you're familiar with the solo, if you're not, you got to go check it out and transcribe it, write it out. If nothing else, write out like at least the first 16 bars. I mean, even in just the 8 bars, the first 8 bars, you can learn so much. But in the first 8 bars, Miles, his phrasing is so amazing, but he's also just milking each one of his ideas. So he says, that's his first idea, right? And he doesn't just move away from that and go, something else, right? He says, and he listens to himself. He heard what he just played. I mean, my guess is that this is what he did, because it certainly sounds that way, right? And then elaborates on that. He doesn't give that away either. He stays in this zone. He stays with this character, and he builds it. Again, doesn't let this go. Right? And he keeps sort of going on. Right? And then now he starts to move on to a different character in a different scene. But again, he doesn't let those ideas go. And I see so many students, people that I work with, where they play great stuff, and they'll be like, wait, you played this killer little phrase, and then you just let it go. You should have milked that, and you should have thought more like a composer in the moment. And it takes a bit of practice to learn how to listen to yourself and edit a bit, right? to just stick with ideas, know which ideas to milk, know which ideas maybe to move on from. But again, the more you listen to Miles in that solo, sticks with it. Doesn't let it go, doesn't abandon it. Right? So just sticking with your ideas, listening to yourself, staying focused. Remember in the previous point, we talked about staying focused, listening to yourself, and don't abandon the great stuff that you're coming up with. And number 5, I told you I was saving the best for last here. Number 5, a lot of bass players just don't know what notes to play, okay? And this is especially common with a lot of more advanced players who may have a handle on sort of the simple triads and things like that. When it comes time to playing the upper extensions of the harmony, you know, the what I call the money notes, the 9th, the 11th, the 13th, they just freeze and they don't know what to play. And if we freeze and, you know, it's not automatic, then we're sort of done, right? When we're soloing, we cannot freeze when we're soloing. So this is something that I see so many bass players struggle with, is just not being totally clear with what to play on a particular chord. Now, this is something that I teach inside my program, which really what the program teaches you is how to be totally automatic on the most important chord types and progressions with what to play, so that I always tell everybody I want to be able to wake you up at 3 in the morning, right? And I can give you a chord progression. I can say, all right, you got 4 bars of C major, 2 bars of D flat major. What are you going to play, right? And you can tell me immediately what you're going to play. And it's not related to a scale. It's not like just C Ionian, D flat Ionian, because that's just like saying, give me the alphabet, give me the series of notes that'll work. They'll work, but they're not going to immediately sound great. And that's really what I'm talking here. It's like, what are the notes that you automatically can just instinctively play that are going to sound great? So I teach this framework, something I call the entry point system. The idea is, for our most important chords and progressions, there are certain target notes that we can aim for and certain tonalities that we can aim for that are always going to sound great. One of them being, let's just take minor. Okay, so talked about D minor 7th earlier. If I take D minor 7th, a sound that I love and an approach that I know is going to sound great is playing an A minor triad or an A minor pentatonic scale or an A minor 7th arpeggio, a bunch of A minor intervallic materials on that. Okay, so if I just play an A minor triad on that, right? I've got A, which is my 5th, C is my 9th, right? C is my 7th on a D minor 7th chord. E is my 9th, all right? So I've already got that sound, that C to that E, that 7th to the 9th is beautiful. Okay? Now, if I just turn that into a 4-note grouping, and if I play an A minor 7th arpeggio, now we're adding the 11th to the picture. Okay, now we've got C, which is our 7th, E, which is our 9th, E is our 11th. All right, now I'm in the harmony. I always say that I'm unlocking the chakra of the chord now, right? I'm opening the door of the chord. And this is automatic, and it's very easy to get this system together. We're not thinking about like the whole range of diatonic options that you would have if you saw D minor. It's just one thing here. And in the program, I try and limit everything to no more than 2 approaches, right? No more than 2 targets and 2 tonalities with this entry point system. Because again, what did I say in number 1? It's about constraining, right? Mastery really comes from constraining the information that you're working with. I heard Bruce Lee say once, I don't remember the quote exactly, but it was something to the effect of, I'm not scared of the guy who's practiced 10 million kicks. I'm scared of the guy who's practiced 1 kick 10 million times. That's how constraint gives you freedom. Okay, so again, this idea of you see a minor 7th chord, you go to the 5th degree and you play a minor triad or a minor 7th arpeggio or a minor pentatonic scale. blues scale. Right? All that A minor stuff is going to sound great. So this approach that I teach, this entry point system, where you just limit yourself to one or two max target notes and tonalities that are going to give you those upper extensions of the chord so that you know automatically what to play and you don't freeze when somebody hands it over to you to go for a ride. So if you're struggling with your soloing, I hope these 5 tips can help to dial things in for you more and help to give you some structure. And essentially, I do think the theme we're talking about here is constraint, okay? Just limiting the options that you're working with. I want to know what's something that you struggle with that maybe I've left out, okay? I'm sure there's lots of stuff that I've left out here. I've just covered 5 things. Let me know below. I really try to reply to as many of your comments as I can. And if you want to learn more about my entry point system and how I work with people long-term in my coaching program, click the link below to talk with me. I jump on calls and I talk to bass players just like you, help bass players solve their problems when it comes to improvisation, and talk about how I can help you and how my program may or may not be a good fit for you long term. So click the link below if you'd like to schedule a call with me sometime this week. And also, if you'd like to learn more just about applying that system to your bass fills, click here.